All right, what is up, my friends? Welcome to the complete set review for the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Return to Ixalan. Pirates, dinosaurs, merfolk, and vampires, and more. A lot of twists here also as well. For your first time here, this is my complete set review for the new set. We're going to do every single card. We're going to do limited. We're going to do constructed. We're going to go over all the mechanics as we hit them on the cards, starting with white. We'll have 7 sections, all 5 colors, multicolor, and colorless in lands. We have awards to give out, Best in Show, Bombin Common, Trap Award, and the Sleeper Award, and lots more to do. If it's your first time here, hit the follow button, hit the like button. If you enjoy this content, support the channel. Seriously, hit the like button on every single one of these. It helps out a lot for YouTube. It really, really helps. Thank you so much. All right. And also, before we get started, I want to remind you all about Bronze Mythic coming up. We're going to be drafting a set. That's always a lot of fun. That'll be on the Bronze Mythic YouTube channel as well. We got 10 new brews also coming up next week. We're going to build decks of the new cards. It's going to be freaking great. And look at me. I'm all ready to go. All right. So let's get right into white, and let's start with none other than Abulo's Awakening. Side note, I'm going to butcher some of these names, and I apologize. There's no pronunciation guide that I'm aware of, and I apologize in advance. So, Abulo's Awakening, we have a sorcery for white 3 and X. Return target artifact or non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with X plus the most encounters on it. It's a 1/1 spirit with flying in addition to its other types. And this is a really, really weird card. So you have obviously kind of a weird build around rare here. This is going to be able to return artifacts and enchantments from your graveyard. The problem is that it's pretty clunky, and then it makes them also into a 1/1 flyer, maybe a little bigger with counters, but for the most part, a creature. And a creature is a really, really difficult thing to, or, I'm sorry, a very easy thing to remove, whereas normally artifacts and enchantments are not easy to remove. So that being said, this card seems kind of finicky, realistically, refurbished kind of effect, but again, being so easy to kill makes it not super exciting. All in all, this card's kind of just like your fun Johnny build around. Nothing super exciting here for constructed, and for limited, same real idea, honestly. You're just not really getting much rate off of this, and you're not really going to have many good things to return regardless. So kind of just like a build around junk rare, is what it is. But moving along to Acrobatic Leap, 1 mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+3 against flying on a turn. Untap it. We've seen these tricks get better and better and better over the years. The 1 mana kind of like finicky tricks in limited. Card is certainly, obviously, not an exciting card, not a high pick in limited, but I do like 1 mana tricks in limited. This card does do a lot. Pretty high toughness, untapping, gives it flying also. So decent ambush. And, this is the kind of filler limited trick. Don't want a lot of these. Don't take it early, but you can play it and not be too embarrassed about it. Adaptive Gem Guard. 4 mana for a 3/3. This is a common. I know the set symbol is pretty tough in this set, folks. It's got a lot of white on it, so it's really, really hard to tell what's a common, uncommon. If you look at the bottom left here, you can see a little C right over here, and there it is down there. So that can be a way to check if you're unsure. This is a common. It is a 3/3 for 4. It's an artifact creature gnome, and it says tap to untap artifacts and or creatures you control. Put a counter on this, but unfortunately, it's only as a sorcery. So without that sorcery clause, this card's awesome, right? You get to play it, sit back on it, and then end step pump it. This is kind of similar to that weird Tarkir mechanic where you have to like pump it at sorcery speed, meaning it's kind of awkward. It leaves you defenseless for a little while. It does scale up, but this card seems like mostly filler. Although important to note that artifacts are a pretty major theme in this set. Saheeli's on the plane. Saheeli and the Watley are like a thing. So Saheeli's here. A lot of artifact stuff. A lot of things going on. And overall, though, I think this card's going to be pretty much a limited filler. Not very exciting. The fact that it does scale in limited can be a little useful if its game's really, really slow. But the main rate isn't really good enough. This card's kind of a stinker. Attentive Sunscribe. 2 mana for a 2/2 artifact creature also. When it becomes tapped, scry 1. This is kind of like your bread and butter limited card, honestly. Realistically, 2/2 for 2, a little bit of upside. It's an artifact also, so if anyone cares about that, it can matter. Again, not really a high pick, but a solid creature for sure. Got to get a scry in here or there. Maybe it trades off. It's a bear. A little extra value. I think the artifact typing will matter also, but for the most part, it's just limited 2-drop filler. Bat Colony.
Where are they?
The freaking Bat Cave, folks. 3 mana for an enchantment. This is an uncommon. Whenever a Bat Colony ETBs, make a 1/1 bat for each, with flying for each mana from a cave spent to cast it. So Tap 3 caves, cast this, you have Spectral Possession. That's really, really good. And then whenever a cave enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+ encounter on target creature you control. This card is really sweet. This card was close to my sleeper pick for this set. I think this card's kind of awesome, and caves are kind of awesome too. Constructed, I don't know. We'll see. The fact that this is close to Spectral Possession is pretty awesome. And you could also, in theory, like bounce it or blink it or something like that too. And that's a pretty powerful effect. In limited, if you get at least 2 bats off this, it's excellent. And unfortunately, you can't get more than 3 unless you like increase the cost somehow. Not really a likely thing, but probably a pretty good limited card also. I like this card. This is definitely a very, very niche card. You obviously must have a bunch of gates. Your deck, this card does nothing. But when you do, this card seems kind of sweet. So, kind of a... Oh, you can't blink it, it's true, because there's no cave mana. But whatever, you can bounce it or whatever we cast it. But kind of a cool card. I think this card's a little better than it looks. It might be a little too niche, but the card's definitely kind of sweet. Clay-Fired Bricks. You have an uncommon here, 2 mana for an artifact. Now, it's important to note in this set, there are mechanics that care about permanents in graveyards, and there are mechanics that care about permanents leaving the battlefield. So a lot of the spells in this set are basically like artifact permanents with ETBs that kind of act like spells. So Clay-Fired Bricks is a 2 mana artifact. When it ETBs, search library for a basic plains card, put it in your hand, and then gain 2 life. So kind of similar to what's a spell effect, doesn't really do anything in play. However, it has the craft with artifact ability. Now, I will say, this set is definitely somewhat dense, so bear with me. The mechanics of the set are cool, but they're a little bit complicated. So, craft with artifacts, and the cost here is 7 mana. So, what does this mean? It means you spend the mana cost at sorcery speed, and you exile this card itself, and then whatever the craft with is from your graveyard or from play. So you're going to tap 7, exile Clay-Fired Bricks, and then exile any other artifact either you control or in your graveyard. If you do this, you've crafted and turned into... We have technology. Cosmium Clin. I said that wrong too. Artifacts. Whenever it ETBs, make 2 colorless gnomes. Gnomes, I say everything wrong.
You're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa.
I'm going to wear that button out this stream. And it's also an anthem. This card's pretty awesome, right? So we have an uncommon here. You play it, you gain a little bit of life, and you draw planes. And then you, later on in the game, spend a bunch of mana. You have to flip it and make 2 2/2s, and then pump your whole team. So, really, really cool limited card. For constructive, this card probably isn't quite there. There's a lot of like hoops to jump through, and 7 mana is a lot. But this card is pretty sweet for limited. Just the ability to have 2 mana cycle, gain some life, and then have value later is pretty awesome as well. So artifacts. Another artifact. Yeah, so cool. So cool limited card for sure. Constructed, probably not. Important to note that you can like you could like Yori in these or blink these or whatever, which is kind of cool too. And the fact this is just like cheap, kind of does this thing early, puts a permanent in play, and then later on could be a thing is kind of cool. Moving on to Cosmium Blast, 2 mana for instant, do a 4 attacker blocker. This is like the 7th reskin of this card, Gideon's Approach or whatever else it might be. We've seen this card 1,000 times. We know what it does. It's just your limited okay removal spell, plays worse than it looks. Good players play around this card very, very easily, but it's okay if you need it. Divine Arrow, yeah, it is what it is, but not very exciting overall. Dauntless Dismantler, 2 mana for a 1/4 Human Artificer. Artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. You can pay a white and XX to sacrifice this and destroy each artifact with mana value X. So this is actually a card more for older formats, right? Where this is going to destroy artifact lands and Mox Opals and whatever else there might be. Urza Saga tokens, which is pretty powerful. And it's interesting to know this card's also a 1/4. Most hate bear kind of cards are 2/2s. Obviously, 2/1s, 2/2s, etc. So 1/4 is a little harder to kill. You can't bolt this, and so on and so forth. So more of a card for older formats, realistically, against the artifact decks and so on and so forth. This can also kill treasures and stuff, although we are sacrificing the creature to do it. So whenever you're killing must be worth 3 mana and a card. But pretty powerful little sideboard card. Probably more relevant in older formats. In limited, probably also just fine as a 1/4 for 2 with upside. And then the tapping, the Kismet effect on the artifacts will matter in limited too. There are a lot of artifacts in the set too. So, fine limited filler card, little horn turtle action. And then in constructed, we'll see play in older formats, get your foils or whatever. Deconstruction Hammer. Stop, it's hammer time. 1 mana for an artifact equipment common. This is a 1 white equipment. Every creature gets +1/+1. It has 3 tap, sack this to disenchant, equips for 1. So we have the short sword variant with a little bit of extra upside here to kill artifacts or enchantments. There are a lot of artifacts in the set, making this a little more useful than it would be normally. Although short sword's not the most exciting card, honestly. So this seems like mostly limited filler or a sideboard card. Just kind of is what it is. Something really too crazy. Dust Rose Reliquary. Is that a freaking heart? That's gross. 1 mana for an artifact. This is an uncommon. As initial cost to cast a spell, sack an artifact or creature. This also has Ward 2. And then when it ETBs, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until Dusk Rose Reliquary leaves the battlefield. So, very interesting. This is kind of similar. This is sort of like an Oblivion Ring sort of effect that's very, very cheap, but it has the rider text of must be sacrificing an artifact creature to cast it. So kind of like a Bone Splinters effect in white, which is kind of weird. But a powerful effect nonetheless. Sacrifice, a map token or some random, 1/1 token, and you get to kill any artifact or creature. And it also has Ward 2, so it's a little bit harder to kill as well. This card's pretty cool. Again, kind of a weird card because you don't look at a card like this in white typically, so it's kind of hard to parse a little bit. Usually like a black or red kind of card as far as sacrifice stuff goes, but I think this card's very, very good. Limited to what you can do with it. You can only play it in certain decks, and also you need to have a white deck that have extra stuff. But say you're playing Inspector and have a clue token, whatever it might be, it's kind of cool as well. So, card does seem quite good. And limited also pretty good as well. 1 mana to kill a creature is pretty sweet, even with the drawback. So, kind of nice, honestly. Dust Rose Reliquary, pretty sweet card. And then limited, obviously, it's phenomenal as well. Envoy of... I'm not even going to try. 2 mana for a 3/3. Cat Advisor. This is a common. Pay 5, make a 1 gnome token. This is just a solid common. Well-sized, 3/3 for 3, totally fine. And then having a mana sink in the late game is kind of cool also. Obviously, 5 mana for a 1/1 isn't super exciting, but fine limited card. Card you're pretty happy to have in your deck. And then if you have any artifact stuff, it'll be a little bit better. Fabrication Foundry. 2 mana for an artifact. Tap to add 1 white. Spends mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact source. So this is a mana rock, which you don't see very often in Standard these days. But it has only taps for artifacts or artifact abilities. You pay 3, tap and exile 1 or more other artifacts you control with total mana value of X. Return target artifact card mana value X or less and revert to your battlefield. Activate as a sorcery. It's kind of a weird ability. We have to sacrifice a bunch of stuff to get something back. Not the most exciting ability unless you're going to get back something good and just it's late in the game, you don't really need it. But for the most part, this is just a mana rock for artifact decks, which is kind of cool. But if it was a deck that wants this, sure, but just seems like a little, it's kind of okay. Don't underestimate how limiting it can be to have a mana rock that can only do certain things, because it really, really comes up a lot. It can be kind of tough. Family Reunion. Aww. 2 for an instant. Choose 1. Pump the squad +1/+1, or creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Important to know this is hexproof and not hexproof and indestructible. So giving all of your creatures hexproof is not very relevant usually, because that just doesn't really matter that much. Usually they're killing one thing. So this is like a modal sort of like protection spell and pump spell. Realistically, too clunky to be useful, I think. If this costs 1, it'd be insane. Constructed playable card for sure, but at 2 mana, kind of awkward. If it was hexproof and indestructible, then we're talking. But all the rats in standard just exile anyway. So, not very exciting. Pretty meh card. Just a limited filler card. Not very exciting overall. Get Lost.
Get off my plane.
Any awards? No awards? None? Okay. That's fine. Still a really good card, though. 2 mana for an instant. Destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. Now, of course, map tokens are the new token in the set, similar to Clues or Bloods, where a map token is a 1 mana, is an artifact that taps for 1. An artifact where if you tap 1 mana, I'm doing great today so far, you can sacrifice it to make a creature you control explores only as a sorcery. Now, 2 map tokens is a lot, but realistically, map tokens are not as good as a clue token or a blood token, and they also are contingent on having a creature in play, otherwise they don't really do anything. Now, I'm not a big fan of Fateful Absence, which of course was a very, very similar card to this that gave your opponent a clue token because it was just card disadvantage. This card is definitely a lot better than that. And killing enchantments is also really good too. I think this card's pretty good overall. If you're playing a control deck or whatever, or just playing, you know, playing a deck against a mid-range deck where you just kind of want to kill their thing. And if you're playing the control deck, you just kill whatever they explore onto. And if you're playing an aggro deck, like, I'll kill your shield and you get a map token. Who cares? You know, the map tokens or whatever. So I think this card is definitely better than Faithful Absence, and Faithful Absence was a playable card. I think this card's pretty good. I think it's one of the better white cards in the set. I was close to winning an award, but not quite. I think this card will see season play for sure. It is obviously a little hard to parse how good a map token is without playing it, but overall I think this card's pretty sweet. Although you are giving your opponent 2 pieces of material, which is relevant. We'll see how relevant it is. Overall, my initial impression is this card's pretty good. Get Lost. And Unlimited, obviously, it's the first pick. Probably a little worse than Limited, honestly, because you can get removal at common. It's clunkier, but still a 1-for-1. Whereas this card is going to give your opponent value always, as it always have creatures. So, honestly, a little worse than Limited, but I think this card's quite good. A Glorifier of Suffering. Diminish for a 3/2 Vampire Soldier. This is a common. Whenever it ETBs, you may sacrifice a creature or artifact. When you do, put a +1/+1 encounter on each of the 2 target creatures. This card's pretty good. This card reminds me a bit of, I can't even, Stockpiling Salver from the last set, where it's like a 3/2 for 3 common that if your deck's built the right way, gives you a lot of values. As we were saying earlier, a lot of the spells in the set, the cards that act like instants or sorceries, are just artifacts in a set with ETBs. So you can, you know, they're permanents for Descend and so on and so forth. So if you just play some spell card that's going to sit there and play and not really do much, you sacrifice this to it. You have to pump 2 things, make this a 4/3, target something else. That's very, very good. This is a very, very solid card. Not incredible. Not Stockpiling Celebrate was really, really good. I don't think this is that good, but very, very solid draft card. Obviously unplayable constructed, but pretty good one. Guardian of the Great Door. Any awards? No awards. But I think this is gonna get the pseudo trap award because I think this card is pretty mediocre, honestly. White for a 4/4 flyer. You got an angel here. As additional cost to cast this spell, tap 4 untap artifacts, creatures, and or lands you control. So for the most part, this is effectively a 6 mana card with Convoke and Improvise, where you can just tap any amount of mana up to 6 to cast it, but you could also tap your artifacts or your creatures to help. That being said, that's a lot. And I think this card pales in comparison to the Convoke cards in the format, like Knight Errant of Eos, where with Convoke, you have like this upper floor of, I can spend no mana on this. Whereas this card, you always need to spend at least 2 white mana. So not just 2 mana, but 2 specific colors of mana, which is rough. And then you need to have things in play also. Otherwise, so we have to have things in play, but our floor is kind of low and our ceiling's kind of low also. And then it's gonna have Vigilance, right? Like, if it had Vigilance, like Sarah Avenger, like a Sarah Angel, a little better also. But yeah, so the only real exciting part of this card is with Aether Vial, like Sarah Avenger. That is not reliable at all. We're way past the point of Sarah Avenger being a good card. This card doesn't even have Vigilance. So I think overall this card is a trap in every sense of the word, but does not win the award for the true trap card of the set. Just a fine limited card and nothing really else. Helping Hand. Now we come to our trap card. Helping Hand. Unearth is back, but it's a lot worse than it used to be, and Unearth was never great in general anyway. So, Helping Hand, 1 mana sorcery, return a creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So, obviously Unearth is the comparison here. Unearth is a pretty cool common from Urza's something or other. Unearth is the same card as this, but it is cycling, and then the creature does not come back in tapped. So Unearth is a much better card than a Helping Hand is. And Unearth is a fundamentally overrated card because when it works, it's good. You know, Unearth my Monastery Mentor, have a bunch of mana. Cool, that's great. The problem is there's times where you just don't have a creature in your graveyard, or your opponent has some random graveyard hate you didn't think of, or you just draw 3 Unearths and no creatures, or whatever it might be, which leads to a lot of inconsistency. This card has all of those problems, but it does not cycle, it does not give you any upside, and then not only that, the creature comes back tapped. So if you're behind, you can't even block with this creature that you're getting back to. So this card looks good, this card is not very good. To be fair, I think this card is interesting alongside like Rafine. There are a lot of really good 3-mana creatures in the format that don't necessarily need to attack to gain value. So I think that, with Rafine, Adeline, stuff like that, it could have a little bit of value there, maybe see a little bit of play. There is some graveyard stuff in the set overall, Explore, and so on and so forth, but realistically, don't think this card is particularly that exciting. A lot of work for not a lot of payoff, and then just a floor is really, really low. So all in all, Helping Hand's my trap card of a set. Is it playable and limited? Sure. It's okay. It's not great. Will it see some play constructed? Probably not. This is the kind of card where just play another threat. Why would you play Helping Hand to return your threat? You can just play another threat that's good on its own. When you're trying to play for synergy, you gotta have a high ceiling. This card doesn't really have a high ceiling. It's getting back a 3-drop. So Helping Hand, trap card for the set. Moving on to Iron Paw Aspirant. Power creep, folks. 2-drop common, 1/2. ETB, put a counter on a creature. This card has been in many, many sets before as a 1/1, not a 1/2. So power creep's rocking and rolling, but this card's very good. This is a very, very good 2-drop. At its floor, 2/3 for 2, which is a good 2-drop in limited. And then as the game goes on, put a counter somewhere else, sacrifice it for some value. Just a good, really good 2-drop common. Not much to tell you in limited. This is the bread and butter kind of card you want in your draft deck. Really, really good. That's a cat. Yeah. Meow. Kinjali's Dawn Runner. We have an uncommon here. This is a 3-mana 1/1 with double strike. And when ETBs Explore. Wasn't this card in like the last Ixalan set? Something very, very similar to it. Kind of a weird one because it has a real swingy power level. If you're Explore, and to remind people what Explore is it's a return to mechanic. Explore means that you reveal the top card of your library. And if it's a land, it just goes to your hand. If it's not a land, you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature, and then you can bin it if you want to. It's kind of like a scry, basically. So either you draw a land or you scry, and if you scry, you get a counter. So if this is a 2/2 double strike for 3, that's a pretty good rate, right? Reasonable. Bin a card, get a 2/2, double strike, cool. If it's a 1 double strike for 3, it draws a land. That's also like fine, but you're not always getting what you want. And the card's just kind of finicky. So this is like a middling limited card for me. Nothing super exciting. If you're playing equipment or playing, if you're playing the Iron Paw Aspirant or some other way to pump it, then sure, you can, maybe pump it up or whatever. It can be fine. But overall, I think this card's, just a middling limited card at best. Nothing really super exciting. Kutzel's Flanker. 3-mana for a 3/1 Flash Cat Warrior. When ETBs choose one, get a charm creature here. Put a +1/+1 counter on this for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn, or gain 2 life, scry 2, or exile target player's graveyard. This is the kind of card that most players absolutely love, but it's just okay. It is modal. It has other options. Sure, that's reasonable. The problem here is that none of these options are particularly awesome unless you're playing against a full-on graveyard deck. And, scry 2, gain 2, 3/1 flash for 3, not very exciting. And then put a counter on it when things have removed. Sure, I guess, if they Sunfall your board, you get a 5/3. Are you still winning that game? Maybe if they're at 5, otherwise probably not. But yeah, I don't know, just a whatever card. I think this card will probably see maybe a tiny bit of fringe play, but overall, this is a card that most players are going to over-evaluate, put in their decks early, and end up cutting from their decks later because it's just not very good. In limited, it's a good card, though. Very, very solid in limited. And yeah, overall, so. Malmut War Scribe. 5-mana for a 4/3 uncommon, sorry. All right, they're a little hard to tell.
Yeah.
4/3 for 5 uncommon. When ETBs, your team gets +2/+1. This card's pretty sweet, honestly. So usually we see this +2/+1 effect in every limited format as a 4-mana instant. So now we're seeing it on a creature that's decently well sized. This one's nice. So if you're an aggro deck, flooding the board, whatever, looking for a finisher, this card seems really, really good. So pretty awesome draft uncommon. Definitely somewhat deck dependent. If I'm playing, an 8 creature kind of control deck, not going to be very, very good. But if you're going super wide, this card's excellent and nice curve topper for your aggro deck or go wide deck. Yeah, definitely going to be a card your opponent casts. You're going to be like, ooh, no. Uh-oh. So, great draft card, not for constructed. Market Gnome is next. We have one mana white for an 0/3 artifact creature gnome. When Market Gnome dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. When Market Gnome is exiled from the battlefield while you're activating a craft ability, gain 1 and draw a card. So this card is a synergy cog through and through, right? We have an 0-3 for 1. That's it. If nothing else happens, that's all this card does. If it dies, you gain a life and cantrip. So chump block, gain 1, draw for 1 mana. Not bad, honestly. But the real exciting part here is if you craft with this card, you get another card. And there's also an artifact and a creature to craft with too. So if some sort of crafting thing's happening in Constructed, this card's definitely going to be part of that. Will it? Not sure. But in Limited, definitely going to be crafting. Definitely going to be playing artifact stuff. Definitely going to be sacrificing stuff. So I think this card's pretty good. Looks innocent. More than the sum of its parts kind of card. Is that an Orzhov like signal, whatever, up here in the middle? Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But yeah, artifact creature, make some blocks, draw some cards. It can attack too, not a wall, so it can get frisky if necessary. But yeah, kind of a cool card. Definitely a fun card. We'll see Constructed Instant Brews on 10 new brews, and it's a cool one. Might of the Ancestors. 3-mana enchantment, uncommon. Being in combat on your turn. Target you control gets +2/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. Magic's a beautiful game, folks. Magic's been around for 30 years, and I've played Magic for 20 plus years. And this is a fairly unique design that we just haven't really seen before. The mana for enchantment, it can pump 1 creature over and over again. So it's sort of like an equipment or an aura, but like with none of the drawbacks herein. You kind of just like get to play it and pump it and then pump something else later on. That being said, it's a card that doesn't do anything by itself. It also does not pump toughness, so the vigilance, if it just trades in combat, being on tap doesn't really matter. This is a weird card, honestly. A pretty hard card to parse. If you're playing a lot of 1/1s and a lot of smaller creatures need a way to push through, this is kind of cool. A lot of tokens. My gut says, though, that this card probably doesn't do enough for the cost. We've seen this effect before in red on like Battlecry Goblin and stuff like that, and those cards were good. The thing is that those cards are creatures. So Battlecry Goblin by itself is a 4-mana 4/2. Which isn't like great, but the floor is reasonable. Whereas this card by itself does nothing. It's on an empty board, does absolutely nothing. So I think this card's probably not great. I think Constructed, obviously not. But in Limited, I think this card's probably going to underperform. I get the feeling that when we're 2 weeks into the format, on 17 lands, this is going to be a very low win rate card. Not saying that it might not have a place sometimes, but I think it'll be overplayed relative to the power level of the card itself. And it's probably just not a card you want in your deck unless you're pretty desperate for a way to push through. Cool card, though. Interesting design for sure. Cool to see some new kind of stuff. Miner's Guidewing. 1 mana, 1/1 flying common with vigilance. Little baby Sarah Angel. And whenever it dies, target you control explores. This is the kind of like coggy draft card where like, do you have equipment in your deck? Do you have ways to pump this thing? We have that 2-drop that can put a counter on things. Now it's attack for 2 on turn 2. That's pretty cool. And when it dies, you explore. So it does seem to play very, very well with the Aspirant, where turn 1, you play Guidewing. Turn 2, you put a counter on attack for 2. And if it dies later, you just explore onto the 1/1. Kind of get your value back, which is kind of sweet also. Card seems good, honestly. It's cheap. It has a pretty good value. A lot of keywords. I would want to have things in my deck that work with this in my draft deck. But overall, I think his card's pretty there on rate and can be a little better than that. Pretty cool art, too. Constructed, probably not. This is some weird bird deck we're not really aware of. But definitely a cool limited card for sure. I like them making playable 1-drops limited. Mischievous Pup. Worst card. 3 mana for a 3/1 flash. This is an uncommon. It's a doggo. Whenever it ETBs, return up to 1 target permanent you control its owner's hand. This card is going to be ridiculous in Limited. As we were saying earlier, a lot of the spells in the set are artifacts with ETB abilities. So play your artifact with ETB ability, then play this, return it to your hand, and play it again. That's just insane value on a decent sized body. You can save yourself in combat. It's got flash. This is going to be an excellent, excellent limited card. Constructed, too expensive. If it costs 2 in Constructed, maybe we could be talking. But in Limited, this is a phenomenal card. This is just like your bread and butter, awesome, uncommon, limited. Really, really good card. The Deepest Foundation, I'm going to try. 6 mana for a legendary creature, God. 6/6 Vigilance. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many tokens are created instead, and when it dies, transform it. So, I mean, these effects are like, what are they? 5 times as many, 10 times as many. We get it, all right? People like Commander, I understand. So, this card is pretty damn bad in any sort of serious constructed format. 6 mana for a 6/6 that has to have other things do things to make it viable. It's just not a playable card in any way at all. So this is a Commander card through and through. However, it is a good example of the gods in the set. There's going to be 1 god for each color, and they are all flip cards. So flip, we flip into a land. So of course, Ixalan had the old flip land cards where they were some kind of non-land card turning into a land, which is pretty sweet, obviously. Kind of the spirit of exploration. And we see here, this card flips into Temple of Civilization, which is a land that taps for white. You can pay 3 mana and transform this back into the creature, but only if you attack with 3 or more creatures this turn and only as a sorcery. So each one of these gods, a mythic god, each color, has this ability where it dies, it turns into a land, it taps for the color, and then has some sort of ability where if you meet this condition, it can go back into the creature. That's pretty cool, honestly, because it's a creature that won't, it doesn't die. It can kind of come back. The problem is that the creature itself isn't very good, and the condition to return is also rather difficult. So all in all, this card's pretty bad. Commander players go nuts, but for constructed play, this card is not playable at all. In limited, however, this card's pretty good. A 6/6 Vigilance for 6 is good enough by itself. I can return, which is kind of cool also. And then there are token makers in limited, or if you get a random, 3 tokens and play out of it's pretty cool too. So fun limited card, maybe a commander card, but definitely not for constructed play. Not there at all. Old-Tech Archaeologists. Common, 5 mana, 4/4. Human Artificer Scout. When it ETBs, choose 1. Return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, or scry 3. Now, it's important to note, like I keep saying, a lot of the spells in this set are artifacts, and there's also a lot of things that want to put cards in your graveyard. So very often it's going to be getting you value. You're going to return some removal spell to your hand or a creature. So 4/4 for 5 with some value is pretty sweet. Sizing-wise, 4/4 for 5 is not great, but it's still pretty big. It still won't trade down with like 3 drops and 2 drops, which is pretty good. So I think this card's pretty solid. Not a card you want to take highly in your draft decks at all, but the kind of card you can get kind of late. Can give you some good value if you're needing it. If you didn't get many rares for your deck, don't have a good top end, this card can do that for you. And then worst case scenario, you can scry 3, which is good in the late game also. So a decent limited card at best, nothing really more. Old-Tech Cloud Guard, 4 mana for a 3/2. This is a common flying human soldier. When it ETBs, make a 1/1 colorless gnome token. Good card. Not as good as the Preening Champion, 3 mana, 2/2 flyer, get a 1/1 cards, which have been very, very good in past formats. No Convoke in this format, obviously. And then a 3/2 flyer for 4 is much worse than a 2/2 flyer for 3. This is going to trade down a lot if you're behind. But still an okay card. I think just a lot worse than your usual 3-drop card like this, but still a playable, reasonable limited card. Landmark. 1 mana, white artifact, ETB scry 2. That's it. As I said, a lot of artifacts that act like spells. Now, but it also has Craft with Artifact for 3 mana. So you can pay 3 mana, exile this, and exile an artifact you control or an artifact in your graveyard to flip it. And what's turned into? Turns over into the Levitator, which is a 1/4 flying creature. Whenever it attacks, creature without flying gains flying. So it's okay. The problem is you're getting almost nothing up front here. It's not like you're getting a 2-for-1 because 1 mana to scry 2 is not worth a card at all, obviously. But if you are able to craft it, the 1/4 flyer with the ability is definitely okay. This card feels like limited filler to me, though. Kind of showing off the mechanic, but not really a particularly effective card. So overall, not very exciting. Petrify. 2 mana for a Aura. This is a common enchant artifact or creature. Permanent can't attack or block activate abilities. This is your bread and butter removal spell in limited. Better pacifism. Stops artifacts also. 2 mana, cheap. Not much to say here. Just a good limited card. Quicksand Whirlpool. 6 mana instant. The spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped creature. Exile a target creature. Pretty standard removal spell also. 3 mana to kill an attacker. Has a mode that's expensive but usable on offense. it's okay. If your deck needs a removal spell, you can do it in limited. Not the most exciting card of all time, but yeah, it's reasonable. Better in defensive decks, obviously. Exile might matter too, but for the most part, just fine. Resplendent Angel returns.
That is your role in life.
Wow. Surprising. I didn't know there were angels on Ixalan, honestly. Kind of a weird reprint here. 3 mana for a 3/3 flyer. Beginning of each end step, you gain 5 more life this turn, make a 4/4 angel, and then you can spend 6 mana to pump it up and give it lifelink, which will obviously trigger its own ability if it lives. Constructed-wise, I mean, there really isn't much life gain stuff happening in Standard right now, nor is there... Oh, there is angel stuff, actually. There's Giada, right? Giada's still legal. So, like... Alright, yeah, I guess. Just a weird reprint. Doesn't really feel on theme with the set. Doesn't really feel on theme with the things happening in Standard. I guess, like, the white Ajani's Primate's still legal, too, because all of this... because of the larger rotation, like that card's still legal, Giada's legal. So maybe there's some angel life gains up in Standard. Probably not. They're all the angels were in Kaldheim, basically. But yeah, all right, sure. In limited, this card's a bomb, obviously. If ever activated, it's insane. And then in constructed, it's playable. Will it see play? If there's a deck for it, I guess. The stats are there. It's certainly a fine card. Ruin Lurker Bat. Where are they? I'm Batman. 1 mana for a 1/1 flying lifelink. This is an uncommon. I thought it was common when I first saw it. It's an uncommon. Beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, scry 1. So descended, what's that mean? New mechanic. This is a really weird one, so make sure you pay attention. Put down your drink, stop working on your computer, look over at me right now, and pay attention because this is a weird one. So descend is a mechanic in a set. It acts like both threshold and morbid. There's the wording of descended, meaning basically morbid for permanent cards. So if you've descended, that means you've sent a permanent card to your graveyard from anywhere this turn. Note that it means from anywhere. So if you mill a permanent card, if you discard a permanent card, if any permanent card goes to your graveyard from anywhere, you have descended this turn. Also important to note that it's a permanent card, not a permanent. If you sack a treasure, if you sacrifice a token, that will not count. Those are not cards, they are tokens. Even though they hit the graveyard temporarily, they are not actual Magic cards. So that's first part of Descend. Taking notes. And so if you've descended this turn on your end step scry 1, that's pretty good, honestly. In the game of Limited, like, things die. You're going to play this on turn 1. If this thing lives to turn 6, you'll probably scry 2 or 3 times over the first 5-6 turns of the game. That's really good. So 1/1 flyer, 1/1 lifelink for 1 is already Healer's Hawk. It's good enough by itself unlimited. And then throw in a few random scries here and there. This is a pretty damn good card. I thought this card was a common at first because I can't read the goddamn set symbols. And it was going to be the Bombin Common if it was, but it's an uncommon. But still, really, really card limited. Outside shot and constructed because a 1/1 flying lifelinker is playable. We saw Healer's Hawk play in Standard a while back, but definitely a great limited card. Cool art too. Like this card a lot. Really, really nice. So play better than it looks. Sanguine Evangelist. More vampires. 3 mana for a 2/1. It's a vampire cleric with Battle Cry. This is apparently a vanilla mechanic now. Battle Cry means whenever it attacks, you pump every other attacker plus +1/+0. When it ETBs or dies, you make a 1/1 bat token flying. This card, it's funny because it feels like a common or an uncommon, but it would be busted as an uncommon or a common. At a rare, I don't think it's playable. It is a pretty good effect. We have 2 bodies for three mana. One of them flies, one of them pumps. If you have an Anthem effect in play, it's pretty good. And if it dies, it gets some value also. Of course, it's a death trigger, so Sunfall still gets it. But yeah, kind of a weird rare. Feels mostly like it's a rare just for limited purposes. But yeah, card's okay. Obviously a great limited card. Constructed, I don't think it's probably there. It also makes a bat, not a vampire, so as far as tribal stuff goes either. But yeah, great limited card. Kind of like a great limited uncommon masquerading as a rare. And yeah, it's all right. Soaring Sandwing. Dinosaurs return. 6 mana for a 3/5 flyer, ETB gain 3 life. That's not bad, honestly. And it's got Plane Cycling 2. The Land Cyclers return again. Obviously, for all you folks who played Lord of the Rings, those Land Cyclers were a lot better because they cost 1. Costing 2 is much, much, much worse, but still fine. You know, and this body's pretty good. You know, what you want out of your 6-drop is a card that can stabilize you. This card blocks great, gains life, and can win the game. Pretty good common. Wouldn't want 40s in my deck, like the 1-mana Land Cyclers, but definitely a pretty good common overall. Soaring Sandwing, it's cool. Spring-Loaded Sawblades, again, another one of these artifact instant/sorceries. 2 mana for an artifact flash, ETB, deal 5 damage, target tap creature opponent controls. This is an uncommon. It has craft with artifact 4. So once again, you spend 4 mana, exile this, and an artifact you control or from your graveyard, and you get the Blade Wheel Chariot, which is a 5/5 crew 1 vehicle. Tap 2 other untapped artifacts you control to crew it. This card's pretty damn good, right? So 2 mana, deal 5 to tap creature at instant speed is pretty good. Just by itself, obviously. The fact it's an artifact, you can bounce it or sacrifice it or whatever, is good. And then if you craft it later on, because you're just, you know, I have this random artifact in my graveyard. Now I have this 5/5 vehicle. That's pretty awesome as well. So great limited card for sure. Craft is mostly going to be a limited mechanic. And this is a really, really good one. Constructed. Thousand Moons Crack Shot. 2 mana for a 2/2. Human Soldier common. Whenever it attacks, pay 3, tap a creature. This is your baseline 2-drop limited filler. There isn't really any benefit for tapping things in this format like there was in the last one. And it's very, very clunky to do. But if you're flooded late in the game, sure. This is just mostly limited filler. Thousand Moons Infantry. 2 mana for a 2/4. This is a common as well. You untap it during each other player's untap step. So basically a 2/4 Vigilance. Also not a very exciting limited common. It's fine. Yeah, 2/4 Vigilance is certainly a reasonable card to put in your deck. Good defensive card if you're playing a more defensive deck. But all in all, just not the most exciting card of all time. Also important because you can miss it, right? It gets a trigger, so if you just say go and then they draw a card, you forget. You're like, ah, crap. So make sure you be aware of that. Coming up to Thousand Moons Smithy. Wake up, folks. We got our sleeper card for white. Thousand Moons Smithy is a 4-mana legendary white artifact. When it ETBs, make a white gnome soldier artifact creature token. That's a lot of words. With this creature's power, doubles equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. So this is a Karn token that also counts your creatures, which is very, very important. Beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, transform Thousand Moons Smithy into Barracks of the Thousand. Legendary artifact land, tap for white. Whenever you cast an artifact or creature spell using the mana produced by this, create a white gnome. The same thing, same token. It's a creature that is a power artifact equal to the number of creatures you control plus the number of artifacts you control. That's a really good token, a gnome struck token. So the Karn struck tokens are already really good in artifact decks. This counts your creatures too. And this thing means that you just keep making them over and over and over and over again. This card's got a lot of words on it. It's confusing. It's weird. It's got some purple art. Very easy card to look over. This card's awesome. Sleeper card for the set. Definitely a constructed playable card for sure. Bomb and limited. I think this card's excellent. Really, really good. Can't wait to build around this card. You know, counting all your artifacts and all your creatures is huge. Doesn't double count, but it's still going to be 5/5, 6/6, 7/7. Really, really exciting card, and that land is really, really good. So super exciting card. Sleep for the set, busted and limited, and that's a good one. Tinkerer's Toad is next. 2 mana for an wait. What? What'd you say? Huh? Bombin Common. 2 mana for an artifact. When Tinkerer's Toad ETBs, make 2 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens. You can pay 1, sack this, and gain 3 life. This card's excellent. I feel like they've tried really, really hard in recent sets to make it so the best common in each color is not just a removal spell. And this card's really, really good. So you play this card, you get 3 cards in play, 3 rectangles or whatever. You get this thing and the 2 tokens, and then you can life gain if you want to. If you life gain, it triggers Descend. It puts a permanent card in your graveyard for Descend also. It's an artifact for artifact synergies. You can bounce it with the other cards or whatever. This card is just freaking great. Really, really good card. Excellent archetype card. Good card on rate also. I think this card's excellent. Never leave home without a gnome.
Waka waka.
Yeah, so really solid card. Like it a lot. Constructed playable? Probably not. Although getting 3 cards for 3 mana and 2 bodies is not bad, honestly. So, card's definitely pretty good, but definitely a great limited common. Probably my pick for best white common of a set. I could be wrong, but really exciting card. Unstable Glyph Bridge, another one of these spell artifacts. This is a 5 mana artifact, basically a sorcery on ETBs. If you cast it, so you can't blink it, for each player, choose a creature power 2 or less that player controls, then destroy all creatures except creatures chosen this way. So this is like a 5 mana Wrath, but they get to keep one thing of your choice. That's obviously a lot worse than Sunfall, but still, you know, a reasonably powerful effect. Obviously, busted and limited. Constructed, probably overshadowed by Sunfall. But it's also got Craft with Artifact, 5 mana, and it can flip over into a Sand Swirl Wanderglyph, which is a 5/3 flyer. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during their turn, they can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Each opponent who attacked you can't cast spells. So really powerful backside, because if this thing's in play, your opponent has to attack you or it can cast spells. They can't do both. That's huge for a control deck. That being said, it's only got 3 toughness, and it's an artifact. It's very easy to kill. You just kill this thing, and then it's act with all your creatures or whatever. And then second of all, if you have to like spend 5 mana at sorcery speed to craft this in your control deck, that's a little tough also. So this is like your classic, absolutely busted and limited card. In constructed, I don't really think it'll have a home, but in limited, wild, really exciting. So yeah, for the most part, you know, mostly limited bomb, but could maybe see play constructed. Pretty cool card though. Vanguard of the Rose, 2 mana for a 3/1 Vampire Knight. Pay 1, sack creature or artifact, indestructible, and then tap it. So we have our Adanto Vanguard variant. The big problem here is 1. If we had no activation cost on this card would be awesome. You know, part of what made Adanto Vanguard so good was you could tap out and it was still safe. This thing, you always got to leave 1 mana up, which is pretty awkward. And then also you have to sacrifice a creature or artifact. You know, that's a workable thing too. But I think for the most part, this card's pretty unexciting. Great limited card. Don't get me wrong. I think this card's excellent and limited. As a good 2-drop, sack a map token, keep it alive, yada. But for constructed, that 1 kills the card. I would say mostly unplayable constructed. But yeah, that's Vanguard of the Rose, unfortunately. Warden of the Inner Sky. It's fine. I kind of want to give the best in show to the my sleeper card. I feel like the sleeper card is more of a sleeper card. So Warden of the Inner Sky is a pretty solid 1-drop here. It's a 1/2 human soldier. As long as there are 3 or more counters on it, it gains flying and vigilance, which is pretty powerful. You get to tap 3 untap artifacts and or creatures you control, but a counter must inscribe 1. The bad news here is that it's activated as a sorcery. Without that text, this card's awesome. With it, it's still quite good. It's a human, it's a 1-drop. The human decks in standard were already looking for a 1-drop anyway. It plays well with Hopeful Initiate. I think this card's pretty good. It's funny because like I feel like if I wasn't trying to boast up the other cards as a sleeper, I might have been happy choosing that card as best in show. It might end up being a better card, but this card's pretty good. You know, very solid 1-drop, human soldier, 2 toughness. Definitely want to try and find some other ways to put counters on it, because once you get that 3rd counter on it, it's a 4/5 flying vigilance. That's awesome. So card seems super sweet. Good draft card also. Definitely interesting, this mechanic about tapping artifacts or creatures. Do you want to be all creatures, all artifacts? I don't know. We're going to find out. But pretty cool card nonetheless. Warden of the Inner Sky. Obviously a great draft card too. It's also a soldier. It's very important because soldier's also dying for a 1-drop too, which is important. That's it. That's it for white. It's the best in show. Warden of the Inner Sky. To recap, Thousand Moon Smithy is going to be our sleeper card. Helping Hand's our trap card. And Tinkerer's Tote is our Bombin Common. That's white. A lot of freaking words in this set, folks. Bear with me. Like, comment, subscribe, hit buttons, hit the follow buttons, support the channel. Seriously, folks, take a half second and like all the videos. It really helps a lot. Tell YouTube to keep things going. If you enjoy the content and you want to support it, that's how you do it. I can't move my hands anymore.
That is your role in life.
All right? Blue's up next. Let's go.